An ominous studio. A storm is gathering behind Roger Waters' eyes as he sits motionless, arms crossed. He isn't blending songs. His anger is simmering. There are 5 sets. 5 terms he finds intolerable. Extreme contempt, not merely mild disapproval. It reverberates whenever Roger Waters despises something. The foundation of Roger Waters' fame rests on defiance. His music yelled out danger. Therefore, he is serious when he criticizes someone. In his opinion, these 5 groups compromise the essence of rock music. It should have been loud, raw, and honest. Which one came first? That one has followed him about like a ghost for decades. Unit 2. At first, there was awe. It was a disgusting finale. U2 appeared in the early 18s to be Pink Floyd's political heir apparent. Major ideas, larger stages, and arenas teeming with seekers of purpose. But for Waters, it was all empty rhetoric. In his view, Bono's talks were little more than show, meaningless preaching. He insisted the music was safe, sterilized, and overproduced. How could he be most enraged? The acclaim. Those in the know have praised U2 as rock's moral compass. The Joshua Tree and the Wall, according to some fans. Waters considered it blasphemy. The Wall, in his mind, was a guttural scream, a self-severing, a cry from the empty space. The Tree of Life? A commercial anthem procession cloaked in authenticity. There was no conscience in him. The ego was what he noticed. Taking private planes from one charity event to another while encased in fancy shades. The turning point occurred during a London show, which I went to just because I was curious. Midway through the concert, Bono stood up, shook his head, and walked out after yet another grandstand sermon about saving the world. He said something as he walked out. What began as awe quickly turned into disdain. The point of rock, according to Waters, was not to make you feel good about doing nothing. The objective was to elicit an uncomfortable enough response that you would take action. Who will be the next group? The icons who, in his view, sacrificed their souls for the sake of stadiums. Rock and roll. Before they became a household name, they were outspoken dissidents. Waters was enamored with them in the 16s. Anyone else? There was bravado, character, and peril in their splits. Chaos was made to sound cool by them. Something changed, though, as the years passed. Sharpness diminished. The trips flourished. Amid the fancy goods and multi-million-dollar lighting sets, the message got lost. The Stones, in Waters' view, ceased to challenge the world and instead began to profit from it. What was once their genuine sound, the blues, became a robotic performance. Baby Lemonade has slipped my mind. That time was practically the crowning glory of my life, you know? Putting on a show of sentimentality and commercial luster. Their prior selves were distorted representations in his eyes. Musicians in the rock era compromised their principles for fame and fortune. Principle, not personality, was at stake. Instead of selling comfort, he thought they could push boundaries. All he could hear on their latter albums was a hollow echo of their earlier success, in his opinion. The disagreement was grounded in reality as well as philosophy. During a European event in the 19th century, Waters allegedly got into an argument with the Rolling Stones crew about the order of performance and sound checks. Anger flared up when a Stones tour manager wrote off Waters, saying the audience wouldn't be interested in her political views. He could still feel the faint hatch-ho. Coldness spread outward from that point on. Sendouts were disregarded. In interviews, sarcastic comments circulated. Those in the know knew there was animosity between the two factions despite the fact that they never publicly fought. There was no hesitation in his response when asked if he would ever perform with them. Joining a circus was something he strongly disliked. He wished for a total uprising. This was followed by the group he dubbed the soundtrack to shopping malls. Coldplay, the band. Exceedingly meticulous, overly cautious, and overly protected. Coldplay embodied all that Roger Waters thought rock music should not be. Desensitized, emotionally distant, and devoid of threat. Song without any sting. For him, the sound was just packaging, not functionality. He openly despised elevator music and tech business advertisements that were designed to fit in with pop rock. He primarily targeted Coldplay because of their pastel images, sparkling optimism, and enormously pleasant performances at stadiums. He thought of them musically as a cozy blanket for a night by the fire. It wasn't their fame that irritated him, but rather their hollowness. Compositions with empty hearts meant for group sing-alongs. Waters saw indifference beneath their melodies, which were meant to promote solidarity. Lack of advantage. Do not feel rushed. Just some upbeat music for those who are too tired to pay attention. Coldplay remained ethereal, refusing to confront the global insanity or even mention any specific people when it erupted in violence, corruption, and collapse. That was escapism, not neutrality, in Waters' view. A disgrace to the original purpose of music. Spark, jolt, pause. To him, Coldplay lacked spirit. He foresaw a plan. Properly cleaned artwork for human consumption. Their songs were not anthems in his eyes. Those were the lullabies of a carefree age. Quite simply, he disapproved of their music. He was not going to be silenced by it. Who will be the next group? Who are these people he says killed legacy rock? Muse was a cautionary story to Waters, a band that had all they needed but never told the truth. Their performances were dazzling displays of light and sound, but he felt like they were soulless noise. The lack of content in their songs was what he perceived as the result of their image-heavy style. Their songs skirted the edge of defiance without quite embracing it. All was secure. Cleverly, he claimed that they were trying to imitate Pink Floyd's ostentatious style. The raw emotion, agony, and blood that had always driven his own art was absent, replaced with grandiose soundscapes, dramatic crescendos, and depressing themes. Disobedience wasn't a state of mind for Waters. There was a mark. There was also conflict behind the scenes. Reportedly, Waters questioned Muse's main spot at a charity event where they were both set to perform. Their message, in his opinion, was insincere. And were unworthy of the limelight that should have gone to musicians who had something meaningful to say. Although their teams never officially battled, rumors circulated among industry insiders regarding Waters' annoyance. He felt as though Muse was stealing without understanding or paying homage without appreciation with her subtle references to Floyd-style production that lacked Floyd-level depth. Waters was fine with being admired, but what about lip service without substance? It couldn't be forgiven. Muse represented a generation that cared more about how they looked than how they sounded, in his opinion. Who will be the last band? The one that made him go from being apathetic to enraged. The band Imagine Dragons. In an interview, Waters was asked about them, and she chuckled. With malice. Can we honestly refer to this as a rock? He raised an eyebrow as if the question had just offended him. Imagine Dragons were like fast food in his mind when it came to music. Packed, stable, and manufactured in large quantities to ensure optimum enjoyment. They personified the idea of a rebel without conscience. Music that, in his view, fills arenas but offers nothing in the way of meaningful content, anthems without conflict, loud tunes that don't have anything to say. He considered them more of a brand than a band. An item encased in neon and guitars. Customized for algorithms and halftime performances, in guitar version. Imagine Dragons presented Waters with a band that stood for nothing while still becoming ubiquitous. This was in stark contrast to his previous work, which railed against war, spying, and insanity. They didn't merely pretend to have substance, that was the problem. Packaging noise as revolution is the worst, he once quipped. He despised them for more than simply their appearance. Undermining the message to make it more marketable. Putting form preceding content. For him, in a world engulfed in flames, their music seemed like drum machine denial. Roger Waters has long pushed for greater bravery, honesty, and intensity in musical compositions. Music wasn't just background noise for him. What we heard was a weapon, a scream, and a rhythmic wound. The objective wasn't to provide amusement. The theme was conflict resolution. It wasn't a lack of skill that made these 5 bands fail, in his opinion. But they honed their sound, smoothed off their edges, and played it safe because they weren't brave enough or bloodied enough. That was the pinnacle of treachery in Waters' eyes. Functional rather than genre-specific. He reminisced about a time when rock music was more than simply art, it was a form of resistance, when lyrics could get you banned and album sleeves could ignite debate in Parliament. He left the world with it. In exchange, he demands that. Waters cared about the issue, therefore he hated, not for attention, but for the sake of it. Why? Because in his mind, art ought to pack a punch rather than a pat, and music ought to scream while society mumbles. That it should transform stages into arenas for combat rather than advertising spaces. Instead of fame, he sought influence. Fighters, not admirers, were his desire. He was more interested in march music than mall scores. Lyrics that questioned. Power rather than courting algorithms. Plus, he isn't looking for solace when he listens now. He longs for music that would awaken a world that is dormant, for truth that will sting, and for rebellion. The majority of what he hears lacks conviction, intensity, and clarity. At a time when the world needed noise, he felt the industry had grown too silent. Roger Waters once said that music is meaningless unless it challenges something.